Hey everybody! In today's tutorial, I'm going to revive an old technique called the Retiform technique. This is from the way back days of when I very first started stamping. And I remember the wow and the ooh-ah that I got from this technique, so I thought I would liven it up just a little bit with a rollograph wheel. This is a rolling stamp. And also with stencils, which I think are a great way to modernize any old technique. Now, if you've never seen the rollograph stamps, they are self-inking rolling stamps that come with ink cartridges in different colors. Today, I will be using an ink to start with. It's called Seattle Sky. It's just sort of a subtle gray. And you just want to get the ink cartridge straight and then snap it into the back portion of the handle and remove the lid. Then you pop in the wheel. This is one called Say What. It's just a text stamp. And you just snap that in. And then you push the ink cartridge to make contact with the rubber as the stamp is rolling. Now I'm also using some Colorbox mini ink pads. I love the size, and the Colorbox stencils, which have some really super fun patterns. I am a stencil addict. I make no apologies for that. But the one that I'm using is called Modern Brick. And to me it looks sort of like a Mondrian painting. It divides your pattern into these nice rectangles and squares. And I always, when I'm stenciling, I use 3M Post-it tape, and I tape the cardstock to the back of the stencil with the Post-it tape just to make sure it doesn't move, especially with a real crisp geometric stencil like I'm using here. You really don't want it to shift while you're working, and so a couple of pieces of tape go a long way. Now, to apply the ink, you can use Clarity Stamp stencil brushes. I'm doing the tutorial at Splitcoaststampers today, and that's what I use in the step-by-step. So I thought I would use just sponge daubers in the video. You could also just use a piece of a cut-up sponge. Now the first ink color that I'm applying is called Fog. These little ink pads are great because they're the perfect size for the MISTI, so you don't get ink everywhere. And I'm just alternating squares. I'm speeding this up for you because it's super boring at full speed. But the idea of the Retiform technique was that you would mask off portions of your card into sections. We just did it with Post-it notes back in the 90s. And you would sponge ink against the Post-it note to create geometric patterns. And then you would move the Post-it to a different angle and make a pattern. And you would often stamp in those spaces that you had masked off so that you had different patterns going different ways in these sponged sections of the card. And back then it was such an arty technique. You know, we were doing such simple things, and this one seemed so artistic and fancy and all ATC and cool. And we would spend a lot of time on those, manually masking those. And so what I thought is, it's a very cool look, but it's easy to update with the help of a stencil, because stencils were different and not as popular and cool back then. So that wasn't something that we thought to apply to them. But I find that modernizing most techniques works great with the stencil. So I have my Seattle Sky ink in here, and I'm just rolling it on my mat to see which direction the text is going so I can orient my card the right way. When using these rollograph wheels, you always want to roll in the same direction because that ensures continuous inking of the stamp. If you roll back and forth, you're going to get a dry spot and a poor impression. So always roll the same way, and it doesn't matter which way. So there's my Nouveau Retiform background, which I think is super duper fun. And now I'm going to switch it out and I'm going to show you a different wheel. What you want to do, you need to clean it first. That's what I realized when I was doing this. So I just rolled it on my mat to get some of the ink off so I didn't get it all over my hands, and transfer it. And now I'm going to switch to this awesome Doll Faces wheel. Now these are the jumbo wheels, and I have the jumbo handle. It also comes in a thinner, skinnier design pattern with wheels in a narrower width for whatever you would like. But I like these jumbo ones, and I especially like these Doll Faces. So I'm using black ink this time, so I'm just going to start the process by rolling it on my mat to get the wheel inked all the way around, and also to see which way they're facing so I know what to do with my cardstock. Now it takes me a second to figure out which way my Misty needs to go. You got to hold your tongue just right to get this part. But I found that using a Misty to make sure that I'm not making an angled line really helps, because you can put the edge of the jumbo wheel right against the ruler on the Misty, and then just use that as a guide all the way down, and you'll have a perfectly straight impression, which is something I am not good at doing on my own. So I really like that tip, and you could do that with the narrow wheels as well. So I hope you've enjoyed this update to the old 90s Retiform technique. I think it's super fun with stencils and stamp wheels. I love revisiting things I haven't used in a while. Links to all the stamps that I've used and all the supplies will be in the description below and on my blog. Thanks so much for watching.